Hello again. It is I, Mrs. Metter. We are going to start Unit 1 with the introduction to experimental design. So it is more commonly known as the scientific method, which I know that you guys have been learning about since basically the 6th grade. But of course, we're going to talk about it from an advanced academics perspective. And it's really important that you guys understand how to design an experiment and how to differentiate between the variables within an experiment, because one of your free response questions on the AP test is all about setting up your own experiment based on a scenario that they give you. All right, so I'm going to walk you guys through the steps, how to identify the variables, and then you're going to do a lot of practice on this in Canvas with a variety of different activities. Okay, so I am going to attempt to use this marker / pen tool that I have. I'm going to see if my writing is going to be any better this time than it was last time. But we'll see, and thanks for bearing with me, guys. All right, so experimental design. The way we look at it is it provides us a framework for how to carry out an investigation. Okay, so again, remember guys, what I write down, you should be writing down as well. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to pick a different color. I'm going to pick blue for fun. Let's see how this works. Okay. So, experimental design. What this does is it provides a systematic way hopefully you guys can read this, but I'll keep repeating it. So it provides a systematic way to solve a problem. And of course, we're trying to determine if a hypothesis you have created is correct or not. Okay? And always remember that this is through experimentation. All right? You cannot determine if your hypothesis can be supported or not without actually doing an experiment. Okay? So, there are 5 specific steps to the scientific method. Okay? We're going to write out those steps. I'm going to pick a different color. Let's go with green this time. All right? So, our first step is always observation. All right, so you have to notice something in order to automatically want to create an experiment to investigate it further. Okay, now after you've made your observation, the second thing you will do is to question. So you're going to make a question based on your observation. So, oh, I noticed the sky is blue. My question is, why is the sky blue? Okay, something like that. All right, our third step is hypothesis. You guys have heard this term before. And I know that, you know, in elementary school or junior high, when you're learning about this, they always teach you, oh, it's just an educated guess. That's really a basic definition for it. A hypothesis basically pulls on all of your prior knowledge to come up with a really good prediction for something that you believe is going to happen. Okay, so it's not just an educated guess. It pulls on a lot more background information. All right. Our fourth step is the actual experiment. All right, we'll talk about more of that in a second. And then our last step is the conclusion? So you have to come up with a conclusion based on your data and what your data is actually telling you. So I want to focus back on our experiment. Okay, so when we do an experiment, we have to look at 3 things. So all 3 of these have to do with our experiment. So let's talk about these. All right. So let me scoot the page down so that we can see the rest of this. Oh, that is too much. There we go. All right. Now, when you're doing an experiment, you have to set up variables. So in an experiment, you know that there is something that the scientist is able to manipulate, and there is something that will change based on what the scientist is actually doing. So, for example, let's just start with something really easy. Let's talk about growing plants in sunlight or in the dark. Now, we all know that a plant grown in the dark is going to die. But the way that we look at this more sophisticatedly is we look at our variables, okay? So our independent variable right here, okay, let me change colors. I like to change colors. Ooh, what is that? That is an ugly color. Orange, okay. The independent variable is what the scientist is in control of. Okay, so as a scientist, you are determining, you are placing this plant in sunlight or in darkness. All right, so the independent variable is the cause. This is the basically how I learned the difference when I was in school. So the independent variable is the cause, because in science we know that we have a cause and an effect relationship. So this is the cause. So we can write over here to the side, example, sunlight or darkness. Okay? So the sunlight or the absence of sunlight is the cause in plant growth. Now the dependent variable is the effect. Okay? This is the effect. And this is what changes. Okay? So, for example, in our plant scenario, our dependent variable would be plant growth, okay? Because plant growth will be affected by the presence or absence of sunlight, okay? The last one we have are constants. Constants are things that have to be kept the same through the entire experiment so that you don't have differences in your data or how your data is collected. So, for example, in our plant example, you would have to use the same type of soil. You would have to use, let's write this down, so the same soil. You have to use the same plant. So you can't use a sunflower and then a pea plant. So they have to have the same amount of water, okay? So constants, we say, are kept the same. Hopefully you guys can understand the difference between those now, all right? Okay, so now we're going to move on to our groups. So when you're doing an experiment, you have to have a control group and an experimental group. One group is going to get the special treatment that you're trying to test. The control group is going to be just the typical normal situation that occurs. Okay, so our control group I'm going to start with first. We're going to say does not receive special treatment. Okay? It does not receive special treatment. So let's think about our plant scenario. What does a plant typically need to survive? Sunlight, right? So our control group would be the sunlight, because we know a plant's already going to grow with those conditions. The experimental group, okay, on the other hand, is going to get or receive the treatment. Okay? Oop, that is not how you spell receive. So receives the treatment. And what we're trying to test, does sunlight or the absence of sunlight impact plant growth? Well, we're trying to see if no sunlight impacts it. So our experimental group would be the one with no sunlight. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Okay, and then repeated trials. So scientists who do actual experiments in real life, it's their job. They have to do an experiment over and over again, multiple times, to make sure they get the right data. Now, why do they do this? Because we want to know that the data is accurate. So we know that they must repeat for accuracy. So let's think about this, guys. In the world of COVID, which we live in now, and they're working on a vaccine, do we want a vaccine where they've just tried it on one person? You have to try it on multiple people to know the impacts of it long-term and short-term on human health. So that's why you have to have repeated trials. Now, one thing I want to point out for you guys is a lot of students misunderstand the whole accept reject hypothesis thing. In real life, when scientists do experiments, a lot of times the experiments just don't work the first time, and they have to go back and tweak them. It is okay to reject your hypothesis. That is part of science. That's part of the process. That's part of learning. Okay? So, it is okay to reject your hypothesis. Okay? So, as I said, guys, there is several ways that you're going to practice experimental design and identification of the different types of variables. You're going to be doing this in Canvas, obviously. And it's important that you really understand this concept so that you can be successful on your free response questions. And the last portion of your Canvas work on experimental design is a practice free response question over you creating an experiment to test a specific prompt that you have been given. All right. So until next time, guys, I will talk to you later. Have a good day.